Kronos, king of the Titans and the universe, lord of time, slayer of Ouranos. The youngest of the first generation Titans, Kronos was the only one brave enough to directly challenge the previous ruler of the universe and the father of the first generation Titans, Ouranos. It was Kronos who castrated Ouranos, and because of this he was elected king. Kronos ruled the world during its golden age, but what does this mean? Why was it a golden age? And why is Kronos viewed negatively in Greek mythology? Let's talk about it. Before we get any further into today's episode, I just want to quickly ask you to subscribe and like if you enjoy my content. It really helps the channel out and it motivates me to make more content. Now back to your regularly scheduled programming. Kronos was born as the youngest of the first generation Titans, and we know next to nothing about his childhood or early life. Instead, the first event where Kronos plays any real role is in the overthrow of Ouranos. I've already made a video that discusses the overthrow of Ouranos, the primordial of the sky and the father of the first generation of the Titans, so I won't go too deep into detail. If you want more detail, check that video out after this one. Essentially though, Ouranos had imprisoned the Cyclopses and the Hundred-Handed Ones, two other groupings of his children, within his wife Gaia, the primordial of the earth. This caused Gaia incredible physical pain, and it quite quickly turned her against her husband. She appealed to her sons and daughters, the Titans, to overthrow their father, but only Kronos was brave enough to actually do the deed. And so, one night that Ouranos came to lay with Gaia, Kronos struck from the shadows and castrated Ouranos. After this, Kronos took his father's throne, and we can move along in our examination. Shortly after these events, we are told that Ouranos and Gaia together both threaten and sort of warn their son, telling him that one of his own children would eventually overthrow him, just as he had done to his father. This would eventually poison Kronos' rule, but for now, Kronos actually presided over a golden age. It was said that at this time, the world had no need for rules or laws, as everyone living was moral and just. The world was peaceful and harmonious, with no one having to work to feed themselves, as apparently the earth provided all that was needed. Man apparently lived in a similar manner as the gods, with no toil nor grief. It was said that these early humans lived to a great age, but retained their youthful appearance, and that all their deaths were peaceful. After their deaths, their spirits would live on as some sort of guardian for those that came after. It was over this beautiful and peaceful age that Kronos and his wife, Rhea, ruled. We are told that for at least some time, Kronos ruled even-handedly. He was apparently a massive improvement from his father. He enjoyed universal support from his siblings and mother, and apparently even his subjects. However, the warning or threat that his father had given him began to expose Kronos' true nature. He was fully focused on ensuring that such a prophecy could never come to pass, and so he decided that each of his children must be imprisoned. This was to ensure that none of them could possibly gain the support, power, or opportunity to overthrow him. So how do you imprison the children of two of the most powerful people in the universe? Well, we take some advice from dear old dad. Ouranos imprisoned his other children inside of Gaia, his own equal. Inside of Gaia, the Cyclopses and Hundred-Handed Ones had no chance of escape because they were unable to overpower Gaia, and it would have worked if it hadn't been for Kronos. So, Kronos realized he needed to cut out the middleman, and so he would be the person to imprison his own children. And so begins the events that Kronos is probably most famous for, swallowing his own children. And one by one, on the birth of his children, Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon, in that order, Kronos devoured each one. This seemed to work, as Kronos continued to rule over the universe even as the number of children increased. However, two things eventually led to his downfall. The first was his unrelenting paranoia. This led Kronos to slip down the slippery slope of tyranny. We aren't given any real examples, but nearly every single source agrees that by the time he had devoured Poseidon, Kronos was a tyrant, who only still ruled because none dared oppose him. The second was the motherly instinct of Rhea, his wife. While Rhea will get her own episode, it is important to remember that she was the titaness or goddess of motherhood. Eventually, having her children constantly denied to her proved to be too much, and so, on the birth of her sixth child, Zeus, Rhea collaborated with Gaia to trick Kronos into swallowing a stone instead of his son. This again kind of echoes the first problem. Remember, Gaia had overthrown Ouranos in part because he had become tyrannical, and now she was doing the same thing with her own son. Rhea kept Zeus hidden from Kronos on the island of Crete. We will fully examine these events during the episode on Zeus, but Zeus hid out on Crete until he was matured and had come into his power. After this, Zeus became the cupbearer for Kronos, and eventually gained his trust. At this point, Zeus tricked Kronos into swallowing some sort of emetic, any substance that makes you vomit, given to Zeus by either Gaia or Medeus. This caused Kronos to vomit up the stone along with Zeus's siblings. We aren't quite sure how exactly the children then escaped, but we do know that each of the siblings emerged fully grown. Probably useful in the upcoming conflict, but was surely terrible for Kronos to vomit back up. But I guess that's kind of what you get when you swallow your insanely powerful and immortal children. This was the beginning of the Titanomachy, a great 10-year war between the newly freed Olympians and their allies, and the Titans and their allies. The two sides looked a little something like this. Kronos was greatly aided by his own brothers, save for Oceanus, who remained neutral, and his brother's offspring. We are told that Atlas was one of the most important commanders on the side of the Titans, while on the side of the Olympians, Zeus had managed to free the Cyclopses and the Hundred-Handed Ones, who had been imprisoned by Kronos shortly after his ascension, along with the Titaness Themis and the Titan Prometheus, the only two Titans to switch sides. We essentially know next to nothing about the actual events of the war. We know that a poem existed that gave more detail on the war, but it's been lost to history. We do know that during the war, the Hundred-Handed Ones forged Zeus his iconic lightning bolt, Poseidon his famous trident, and Hades his helm of darkness, and that the battles shook the very foundations of the earth, and even Tartarus felt the disturbances from the forces fighting. Zeus was apparently the driving force behind the Titans' defeat. Hesiod tells us, quote, "Then Zeus no longer held back his might, but straight his heart was filled with fury, and he showed forth all of his strength. From heaven and from Olympus he came forthwith, hurling his lightning. The bolt flew thick and fast from his strong hand, together with thunder and lightning, whirling an awesome flame. The life-giving earth crashed around and burning, and the vast wood crackled aloud with fire all about. All the land seethed, and ocean streams, and the unfruitful sea. The hot vapor lapped around the earthborn Titans. Flame unspeakable rose to the bright upper air. The flashing glare of the thunder, stone, and lightning blinded their eyes, for all that there were strong. Astounding heat seized chaos, and to see with eyes and to hear the sound with ears, it seemed even as if earth and wide heaven above came together. For such a mighty clash would have arisen if earth were being hurled to ruin, and heaven from on high were hurling her down. So great a crash was there while the gods were meeting together in strife. Also, the winds brought rumbling earthquake and dust storm, thunder and lightning, and the lurid thunderbolt, which are the shafts of great Zeus, and carried the clangor and the war cry into the midst of the two hosts. A terrible uproar of terrible strife arose, mighty deeds were shown, and the battle inclined. But until then, they kept at one another, and fought continually in cruel war. Following the war, Kronos was imprisoned along with many of his male siblings in Tartarus. The only male Titans spared were Oceanus, Helios, Atlas, Prometheus, Epimetheus, and Asterius. The other female Titans are a bit of a special case, and we'll discuss those more when we talk about them. Atlas would receive his own special punishment, while the others either stayed neutral or sided with the Olympians. Poseidon erected great bronze walls around the Titans' prison, while the Hundred-Handed Ones served as the wardens of the prison. And truthfully, that's where the story of Kronos ends most of the time. Some legends, much later writings, tell us that eventually the male Titans, including Kronos, are freed and allowed to rule over the Isle of the Blessed in the underworld, but these writings are typically rejected by most modern historians. So then what does Kronos really represent? Well, firstly, Kronos and his father represent an example of what can, and maybe even should, happen to tyrannical rulers. Both Kronos and Ouranos are described as fantastic rulers at first. I mean, your reign doesn't become known as the Golden Age without at least a bit of good ruling. However, they allowed their paranoia to overcome their senses, and it eventually led to their downfall. Kronos, and even the other male Titans, represent a counter or a primogenitor to the Olympians as well. In our real-world examination of these myths, we also see that the Titans may have represented the gods of other cultures as well. Greek mythology, especially Greek mythology prior to the Olympians, was greatly influenced by the Near East, or roughly what we would today call the Middle East. The Hittites, the Hurrians, Babylonians, and frankly quite a few more, all have references to an older caste of gods who ruled before their main gods took power. The Hittite text, the Song of Hammurabi, or Song of Emergence, is almost a bar-for-bar copy of the story of Kronos and the Titans. The kingship passes from Anu, the embodiment of the sky, to Hammurabi, to the storm god Teshib. I mean, Hammurabi literally castrates Anu, takes over the kingship, and then swallows his children. Sound familiar? I mean, the Hittites even called these old gods former gods, and Hesiod does the exact same thing, calling the Titans former gods. While we should be careful not to draw too much on the similarities between the two stories, to me it kind of seems as though the Titans not only represented an older version of the gods, but maybe even an older version of Greek religion. Perhaps they represented what religion had come over from the Near East. Remember, the trade between Greece and the Near East had been occurring for some 800 years before Hesiod wrote Theogony. Maybe the overthrow of the Titans is more akin to the cultural overthrow of the Near East influences, and a new period of domination of Greek culture. Of course, this is all just my own thoughts and speculation, but I would love to hear what you think about it down in the comments. And so ends our examination of Kronos. Kronos was a bit of a mixed king. Yes, he ate his children and ruled like a tyrant during his latter period of rule. But the fact is that his period of rule is literally called the Golden Age. It goes to show that maybe it wasn't all that bad. For much of his reign, the world was peaceful, bountiful, and beautiful. But his never-ending paranoia destroyed him, and eventually led to his downfall. It's a good lesson to remember, not only for the gods, but for ourselves as well. Kronos' legacy will always be as the ruler before the gods, good or bad. But he did give the world Zeus, Poseidon, Hades, Hestia, Demeter, and Hera. These would be the core for the next generation of gods, and would go on to rule the universe for the rest of time. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you learned something. I apologize that this video did not come out on Wednesday. I had a bunch of recordings become corrupted, and I spent hours, and eventually even days, trying to get them back, but to no avail. So I had to re-record everything, and was forced to delay for a bit. I apologize. There should be another video up this Sunday to make up for missing Wednesday and Friday. If you have any comments or questions on the video, or believe I've made a mistake, please comment down below, and please like and subscribe if you enjoyed. It really helps the channel out. Peace.